Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, I hope I am fairly audible and visible. And friends and attendees of this webinar, I welcome all of you to this virtual event organized by Dynamic CISO in association with IBM and NetMagic. I am Mukbil Ahmed, the executive editor at Dynamic CISO and Greyhead Media. But friends, first of all, I wish and hope that all of you are safe and secure. These are indeed very uncertain times. The topic for today's discussion is defend your enterprise successfully using managed threat detection and response. We would all agree well that the threat landscape has changed significantly in the past decade, with steep rise in cybercrime, particularly during the lockdown period. Cyber attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated and rampant. Advanced threats such as ransomware, which are propagated via malicious and compromised websites and botnets, can wreak havoc on an organization. A weak security posture can leave enterprises to the mercy of cyber attackers and crimes. Moreover, digital transformation is fueling the emergence of several new technologies, diverse devices, locations. All this makes defending them that much more difficult. Therefore, today we will discuss the importance of a robust security posture, particularly in the context of digital transformation in a post-COVID-19 world. In the webinar, we will try to understand and learn how to accurately detect and prioritize threats across the enterprise, gain intelligent insights for faster response times, consolidate logs and network flow data, correlate information to accelerate incident analysis and remediation. And friends, I must add that there couldn't have been a better time to discuss all this. And for today's discussions, we have a very interesting and a very knowledgeable lineup of speakers. And I would definitely take up this opportunity to introduce them to all of you. The first speaker of the day is Mr. Rishikesh Kamath, Vice President, Products Management, Managed Securities and IMS, NTT NetMagic Solutions. Rishikesh heads the Managed Security and Infrastructure Managed Services business at NetMagic NTT. He is responsible for evangelizing service design and development, as well as go-to-market of global managed services, managed security services, and CDN portfolio. With over 20 years of experience in IT infrastructure services, Rishikesh has been a key driving force in the growth of the company's managed services business over the last half decade. Passionate about cybersecurity, he has led the development and rollout of multiple platform-based security services offerings at NTT NetMagic. Rishikesh works closely with delivery teams to bring innovation in service delivery and ensure a consistent and quality customer experience. It is my honor to also introduce the second speaker of our webinar, who is Mr. Sudeep Das, Technical Sales Leader, IBM Security Systems. With more than 22 years of IT experience in the fields of information security and application development, Sudeep is currently working as the tech leader with IBM Security, India and South Asia, leading information security solution design and security evangelism for enterprise customers and the government vertical. Welcome to the webinar, gentlemen. Before I request Rishikesh to start his talk, I would like to point out that the last few minutes of the webinar will comprise a question and answer session. And I would request all of you to keep sending your queries, questions to us. We shall definitely try to accommodate them as much as possible. All yours, Rishikesh.
Thank you, Mukbil, and very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join this webinar. Mukbil, can you just confirm if my screen is now visible?
Yes, yes, Rishikesh, please go on. It's visible and you are audible.
Okay. So I'm just going to spend about few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, on setting the context of this. And what we're going to discuss today is around the topic of managed threat detection and response, and how NTT and IBM together can help you achieve a managed threat detection and response within your organization. So, Mukbil, you spoke about digital transformation, right? So we know that the people, process, technology, these are all evolving as we go along. And at the same time, there is there is a lot of new expectations from the customers, and all of this means that we as organizations, we as businesses have to get into new markets, face new competitors, and also innovate in the delivery models, build new delivery models or business models, right? So all of this is made possible by digital transformation, but with that also comes a lot of cybersecurity challenges. Give me a second. Okay, there we are. NTT runs a global threat intelligence report every year, and these are some of the key findings from the 2020 report that I have shown out here. First and foremost, adversaries continue to innovate. They are continuing to use new technologies. They continue to use machine learning to specifically attack or launch targeted attacks. They continue to leverage the existing vulnerabilities. So old vulnerabilities still remain a prime target for most organizations. In fact, the report finds that in many organizations, even Heartbleed today is still not patched. And these very organizations are also now, investing a lot into IoT, whether it is a manufacturing firm, whether it is a fintech firm, whether it is a bank. Everybody's into IoT these days, and this IoT environment itself is being used or weaponized to launch attacks within that organization, and also to leverage to launch attacks for on other organizations, right? And because of the digital transformation, because of the digital landscape, we have a lot of content management systems in place, because that's where you have your end users coming and consuming the content that you have to deliver. And the report finds that CMS is heavily targeted. Now, when all of this is happening, in terms of the changing technology landscape, in terms of the changing threat landscape, compliance continues to grow really complex, because regulators are increasing their footprint. Regulators are asking more from organizations. There are steep penalties associated with non-compliance. So GRC continues to become complex. And finally, the report finds that from a technology perspective, technology industry is one that leads in terms of the attacked industries. Now, that should not come as a surprise, actually, because when we talk about digital transformation, technology is basically within the supply chain for the digital transformation. So if attackers can get into the supply chain itself, they have a they have a job that is much easier. So technology leads the attack industry. So all in all, defenders have their hands full in keeping their assets safe while complying with all the regulations. So here I've given some snapshot of the global attack types reports. In fact, I would like to make a point that this NTT report is available on the website for a quick registration. So after this webinar, you can feel free to go and download it from the website. If you need us to send it out to you, we'll be more than happy to do that. So from a global attack types perspective, nearly 55% of all attacks were related to applications. Almost 20% of all attacks were targeting CMS accounts. Again, this is clear indication that even the cyber attackers are launching or riding on the digital wave, and they are basically behind the organization's critical assets, right? The success rate of targeted ransomware is very high. While the generic ransomware success rate has gone down, targeted ransomware, which is very specific to an organization, which is very specific to individuals at times, has seen a high amount of success rate in the last 12 months. There have been a significant increase in DOS and DDoS attacks, creating availability challenges for organizations. And finally, weaponization of IoT infrastructure. And in terms of benchmark score by industry, we can see that industries like finance and healthcare and professional services actually improved their baseline score from 2018. Again, this should not come as a surprise because these are heavily regulated, especially finance and healthcare are heavily regulated industries. So maybe it is that compliance is actually driving these organizations to really up their ante against cyber attacks. This the score that you see on the screen out here is basically on a scale of 1 to 5. Industries like technology and education and manufacturing, unfortunately for them, the maturity went down a notch compared to their 2018 baseline. But again, you can find all of the details around this and much more in the entities report. This is a quick summary of the attacks per industry and what type of exploit techniques have been used and what types of attacks are being used for a specific industry. Again, we can see here that almost 25% of attacks are on technology, followed by government and finance, tied at nearly 15-16%. Professional services and education. Obviously, there are others, but these are the key industries that are targeted. In terms of the type of attacks per industry, we can see that application specific and web application feature in almost all of these industries, because this is where the digital footprint lies, the applications, the web applications, the mobile applications, and this is where attackers are really trying to leverage the weak points to get into the organization, right? In terms of percentage of exploit techniques per industry, we can see that remote code execution features very prominently in almost all of these industries, followed by injection type of attacks. Again, injection type of attacks is something that would pertain to application specific attacks, right? In net, this gives a summary of attack types by industry, etc., right? Obviously, I'm not meant to cover this in detail, but like I said, again, the details are available in the NTT Global Threat Intelligence report. And there you will find more specific information, not just on application attacks, but how ransomware is being leveraged, what is a targeted ransomware, how end users are being tricked into downloading ransomware and malware, how network devices are being a part of the weak chain in terms of cyber attackers gaining a foothold into the organization, right? So it's not just only about applications, it's much more than that. And all of those details are available in that report. So here are the key recommendations. The report and entity, we recommend to customers to have an intelligence-driven security, which basically means having a more proactive approach, which can address complexity and incorporates intelligence capabilities. Because if attacks are targeted towards your organization, you need to have the intelligence capabilities to detect who is the threat actor acting against you, what kind of means and methods are they utilizing to get into your network, get into your organization, and all of that, right? So plain vanilla security monitoring is something which is not enough. You obviously need to have that, but it's not something enough. Okay. Then we recommend continuous monitoring, and in this we recommend to have a comprehensive visibility of the internal as well as external environment. So in the internal environment, we need to look at all the spots, whether it is cloud, whether it is endpoints, whether it is applications, networks, databases, all of that, right? And on the external environment, I'm sorry, this is where the cloud thing would come in. So we need to have visibility around internal and external environment. Then the third recommendation is to have it secure by design, which means that the security program needs to be aligned to the business requirements. It needs to be agile to change, and it needs to provide a repeatable and automated response. Now, a lot of times we see customers investing very heavily into security, and then realizing probably within a span of 18 to 24 months that that investment is no longer enough or actually has become redundant because the threat landscape has changed. So making sure that your security investments are agile to change is very important. And finally, controls standardization. So this is where we recommend customers to adopt frameworks and best practices, frameworks such as the NIST cybersecurity framework or the MITRE ATT&CK framework. All of these go a long way towards providing a standardized, repeatable response to threats. And so finally, managed threat detection from entity. So what do we really mean by that when we offer managed threat detection services to customers? So first and foremost, it's about deep visibility. So we detect threats for you across infrastructure, networks, cloud, database, end users, and applications. Yes, you could start with one or two of these areas and then grow, but the more visibility you have into your environment, the better you're able to make sense of targeted threats, the better you're able to make sense of threats that otherwise would fly below the radar. Inbuilt automation. So this is where repeatable automated response, which are mapped to frameworks, including attack and NIST. This is the managed threat detection service provides you with a complete mapping to the MITRE attack framework and response, which is an automated in nature. Leading threat intelligence, we leverage IBM's X-Force threat intelligence, which is deep expertise in the global threat intelligence, and it provides analysis. Threat intelligence is necessary to provide contextual detection and response, right? Because you need to, like I said earlier, understand what's ailing your organization, who's the threat actor hell-bent upon making your life miserable or behind your stealing your data. A hybrid approach. So this is where the threat detection service, managed threat detection service, leverages the benefits of multi-tenant services while giving the full flexibility to customers to maintain the logs at your own location for compliance. So logs do not leave your network. You can maintain full compliance around that. This service is machine learning and AI enabled. So this can detect emerging threats, threats that are flying below the radar. So it can detect the low and slow type of attacks. It can detect targeted ransomware attacks. So machine learning is being used heavily, both by defenders and attackers. And hence it's important that we use the right technology to stay ahead. So our managed threat detection and response service is powered by IBM's solution. And as we all know, IBM is, when it comes to machine learning and artificial intelligence, IBM is pretty much miles ahead by any means, right? And finally, pay as you use. So this is where the agility comes into picture, because in this service, you can pay only for what you consume without any long-term lock-in commitments. You can start small and increase the maturity as required. You can start small in terms of the scale. You can start small in terms of the number of areas that you want to cover, and then grow, right? So you only pay as you use, and you don't really need to invest heavily. So with that said, I would now like to hand over to Sudeep, and request him to take us through some of the finer details of how IBM and the QRadar solution can help. What are the different use cases that organizations should be looking at, and how QRadar helps solve those use cases. So Sudeep, all over to you.
Hey, thanks, Rishi, so much. That was wonderful. So what I will do in my next 10 to 15 minutes is to give you a little deeper understanding of the platform that is being used to provide the MDR services, right? And then we'll follow it up with a quick demo of a very specific use case, which is something that all of us are we can relate to: phishing, right? So we will show you how to complement the phishing controls that you might have within an organization, how our MDR platform can make sure that phishing attempts or phishing incidents are actually handled quickly and efficiently using this platform services, right? So with that, let me pull up my screen. Right. So the four pillars on which this entire platform sits, right? And Rishi was mentioning the same earlier. Visibility across the different telemetry data that is going to allow you to understand what's going on, right? So the visibility across events that are being generated by, and I'll go deeper, a little bit deeper into each of these components as we move forward. So the first thing is find out the security telemetry, right? What is going on, that information needs to come in. And that information will feed into the system where I will be running my algorithms to do my detection, right? So out of these billions of events that you're going to monitor over a day or over a month or over a year, you're going to come up with number of alerts that you want to work on, right? So, and it needs to be high fidelity alerts. Otherwise, you will end up in what we call as an alert fatigue, right? And another mention that Rishi mentioned earlier was the, a risk view to these alerts, right? So those alerts, once we have detected, most of these alerts can get simply gone ahead and responded to the way, antivirus response or bad connection from the outside world comes in without, so those things can get stopped. But many of these will need investigation, and that investigation will lead to a root cause, and that root cause will allow you to improve upon your security posture, right? So that's the investigation part of it. And pretty much the response needs to have happened automatically, quickly, and in relevant time frame, right? So these are the 4 pillars, right, of an MDR. Start off with the visibility, get into the algorithms of detection, make sure that the processor for investigation are all in place, and of course, take action so that the activities of the MDR platform actually yields some result out of it. So we'll go a little deeper into each of these components as to how the platform can make life simpler to manage all of these things, right? It's quite a complex problem. So we do envisage there's going to be a lot of, sorry. So one of the things that Norishi mentioned was that you can start small, and then as you grow up, you go. But the point is, if I start small and we know that we are going to grow to a certain level, we need to make sure that what are those certain levels that we are interested in, right? So what if I'm completely on-prem and I start onboarding a cloud service? Am I going to be in a position to use the logs that an AWS is generating or an Azure is generating or a GCP is generating? Yes, that those are things that we need to be looking. What if I'm going to bring in IoTs into my infrastructure? What if I'm going to say, have my factory being monitored, the OT technology that is running out there, and so on and so forth, right? So all of those visibility into the different newer infrastructure, those are important. Almost all attacks that are critical in nature will involve a person, right? Apart from the ransomwares and the automated attacks, the ones which leads to IP theft kind of things, you have a user associated with it, and those are many a times a way more hidden, less noisy, and hence user monitoring becomes extremely critical for an MDR platform. So, right, the user behavior analytics. Make sure that I'm able to catch the attack as it flows over the network, right? Before even taking an action, am I going to be able to, for example, the things like, Rishi mentioned, one of the attack vectors, DNS attacks, right? That's one big one. The other one which we talked about was the injections, right? The processes that are getting injected, endpoint visibility using SysOne. So there are these various data elements, or what we call as the security telemetry data that we need to pick up, right? Network data, endpoint data, identity related data, cloud usage related data, and of course the applications, the infrastructure data, the switch, router, OS, antivirus, hundreds of those elements which build our thing. To be able to build all of these together is what the platform is supposed to make sure that it is a seamless, a lesser painful journey. It's a painful journey to collect all the data, but if you have a good security information infrastructure built, you have the right visibility, that is when you can start building your analytics, which is the next phase, right? So that is where I start doing my detection. Now, those detection, one of the earlier points to bring back, you need a framework on which this detection things are. Otherwise, we will just end up doing or trying to find out what we know. A framework like the MITRE framework gives me the entire list of tactics and tools that are being used. Am I covering all of those threat vectors? Am I covering all of my assets? that framework in which I need to be able to understand the known attacks. One of the things which again, from earlier conversation, the older vulnerability still exists. The IPS signatures are not updated. These are things which are known. Am I in a position to manage these unknowns and make sure that I have the right hygiene that I need to have? So one of the detection capabilities is to make sure that the hygiene elements are all in place. We make sure that we look for those IOCs, we look for those gaps in my security posture, and make sure that I am dynamically changing. And that is where the AI ML comes into picture, right? Learn from what is going on, and based upon that, see what looks to be abnormal, which looks to be deviating from the normal. It may not be malicious as yet, but it is still deviating. It is moving, it is trending towards a higher risk posture, right? We saw that high risk posture come up very, very quickly when people moved from working in a set environment to work from home, right? Overnight, we started seeing a huge change in behavior. Now the system, when it sees that everybody is changing in behavior, it automatically readjusts and says, okay, this is the new normal, right? For us human beings to understand the new normal, it is difficult. But for machines to understand the new normal, all they have to do is put their identification of outliers, correct place, and see the similarity and say, okay, this looks to be normal anymore, right? So those are the detection capabilities powered by years and years of research, and today's world, the AI/ML engines, which brings in the behavioral aspects into picture to very quickly identify all of these things together, right? One of the aspects which is important from a detection perspective is that we traditionally, in the MDR world, we traditionally only talked about logs. And then when we talked MDR, we always talked endpoints, right? Endpoint and logs, that's given. We need to be able to do that. What we are seeing more and more adoption is of the network layer identification, right? And the demo, you will see how the phishing attack actually gets picked up from the network and supplemented, and how it becomes simpler when we actually look into the traffic that is getting generated after a phishing attack has become successful, which tells me the full extent of the incident rather than a point in time within that particular attack, right? Email coming in, that phishing email coming in is not the start or the end of the attack, right? There's a whole bunch of other corollaries that will have to be tied together or chained together. That is what we will be doing in the detection phase, right? And then, of course, the investigation. We talk about threat hunting, right? Extremely critical for us to be able to find out what is the length and breadth of what we are seeing in the system right now. And that length and breadth could be, with the information could be sitting within my organization in different data stores, or within the QRadar system, or it could be in the outside world, right? And all of these investigations under a framework that is the MITRE framework, which helps me identify that if I am in a particular stage in a particular attack, that much priority should I be putting into my investigation, right? Because I have got each of those incidents which I have to investigate. When I put it into the MITRE framework, I will know, okay, this doesn't seem to be anywhere near creating a havoc for me. So let me deprioritize it. Let me look into things. So those kind of bring in the recommendations as to what needs to be done. Make sure that I understand the source and the destination and the people and the posture, the security context in which all of these things have happened, right? So all of those aspects, all of those tools that is needed for analysts to be able to quickly zero down on what is happening, that is where the platform comes into picture with different kind of things. For example, do in terms of finding out the global threat vectors, find out the users, what did they do, what is the context of the user, what is the endpoint that that user is doing, and also from a data perspective, from an identity perspective, and so on and so forth, right? So there are various elements which all gets into this single platform, which allows you to do investigation in a much more seamless manner. And the last portion of, but not the least, is the response, right? Whatever I see, I make sure that it is actionable. I make sure that you are able to, take a corrective action so that next time it happens, you know that there is no next time because I've already taken corrective actions, right? Then 0 days will happen, so on and so forth, right? Again, so there is the response piece has to be dynamic in nature, because that's what is, it's not an idle process. It's not more, that is where I think the response from an IT infrastructure based incident and the security incident becomes different. And we'll see here in the demo as well. An incident which starts off with the phishing very quickly adds on to a ransomware kind of incident, very quickly adds on into a data breach incident. Now, when it is a single incident with 3 different tasks assigned to it, you need to be able to orchestrate your responses, dynamically change the orchestration and the relevant playbooks behind it into this whole thing, right? And it's critical that we are able to handle each of those modular incidents into a single chain and make sure that all the relevant people are actually working on it. So that's one of the things which becomes important to understand. A security incident is not just about blocking a particular endpoint, but can very, very quickly become very important. If that endpoint is of an executive, the whole task list becomes very different, right? So that's context. So that's where the response piece comes into picture. So to summarize though all of this thing, right? You have the visibility of different sources. All those sources comes into a single namespace, right? People term this whole thing as a data lake, right? I bring in all my data into my data lake, normalize it, categorize it, enrich it, and make sure that it is available. I have a good information infrastructure in place to run my threat models, to run my behavioral chaining, to make sure that the threat intelligence is being correctly utilized, right? So that it's detection. Once I have my detections, then I make sure that I understand the whole thing through different kind of analysis, data mining activities, AI activities, search activities, and of course, the dynamic playbooks, automation and orchestration, which helps me make sure that I'm actually acting on it. This would be the summary slide and a bit of things. So one of the best things about a platform-driven approach is that tomorrow, as you go ahead and want more services, you really don't have to bother to sit around whether the product is going to give me that services or not. You could just go ahead and start adding on more capabilities if it is a platform-driven solution, right? And that's what we are working out here. So the app concept, like user behavior, comes into picture. DNS analytics come into picture. So different kind of analysis. So as we go ahead, we build this common app. So we have built this common MDR platform which can cut across different systems that are of concern to you. Make sure that I have a universal insight that I'm building out. I'm able to run the case management. I'm able to develop new things and provide what is needed. Security insight, take action faster, right? So the topmost thing. So that's the modern, single architecture for a SOC that would help grow the use cases, grow the scale, the coverage, and all the other risks that you really are concerned about. And so that's what I had to present in terms of the platform that you're using here at NetMagic. And we will move over to a quick demo on we do have close to 25 odd minutes. So we will go ahead and get on to the demo. Ankit?
Yeah, hi.
So as Ankit is coming up, I'll just quickly take into the questions that I'm seeing out here. How the tool help in determining threat priorities? How does the automation and AI work here? What kind of recommendations this tool give, right? So different kind of, technologies are used for threat prioritization. Things like contextualize it based upon the vulnerabilities that are present within the organization. Priority based upon the kind of risk that particular element, the asset criticality, the asset which is being targeted, or the user who is being targeted. So all of these different contexts are utilized to come up with this. How does AI help here? AI helps in multiple ways. One, AI learns the kind of alerts I get and the kind of responses I've given into that on my earlier states, right? So removing all false positives, finding out the trend. Is it trending towards a bad behavior or a normal change in things? So AI helps me identifying out of those many changes that will help happen within my organization, which are the ones which are critical for me, right? So AI can help me in doing that. And of course, the automation part of it is where it can help in threat hunting automation. For example, if I know that there is a user involved, I will automatically bring in contexts around that particular user and see whether the user changed his password sometime back, whether the user belongs to finance, whether he has an endpoint which is very vulnerable, it was never patched. A lot of threat hunting exercises that could be done. And of course, the global threat intelligence brings in the recommendation part. What did the world do? What did I do within the organization? So those recommendations could come into picture. And one question that I will answer before I go, because this is a very, I love this part of it, how playbooks can be dynamic. The definition of playbook can be hundreds. A playbook could be as small as block a particular firewall port, or it could be as difficult as what are the 7 different steps when a person loses his laptop, let's say, right? Now, he lost his laptop and he was also a phishing incident victim. They are not 2 different incidents. So what I would do is I can, based upon the data points, I could merge these 2 playbooks together and create one incident out of it. So that's the dynamic playbook. Based upon the data that I gather through the incident analysis, you create these dynamic playbooks so that one incident can cover all the relevant tasks and not open up different incidents and different playbooks to start managing that things. So we'll take up the questions later on. We will have time. So over to you, Ankit.
Sure, thanks, Deepda. Which is one of the key and critical attack happening these days, considering the COVID scenario and work from home scenarios. And basis on that, we will see that how IBM phishing attacks happening in your organization.
Ankit,
but after a user opens that particular,
yeah, your network quality is not that good, Ankit. Maybe you should put your video off and.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but your network quality is still not good.
Just on that off. Yeah.
So meanwhile, I would suggest, Sudeep, if you could continue with your talk. By the time Ankit tries to fix his connection and...
Just a second.
Yeah, so just remove the video, Ankit, and...
Yeah, I just removed the video. Is it audible, right?
Yeah, you are better now. Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. Apologies for the glitch. Today, I will be demonstrating you the phishing use case. And using IBM QRadar and its capability, we will not only just detect the phishing mail being received by one of the user of an organization, but once that user clicks on or opens that particular attachment and becomes a compromised host or a compromised user, what all other activities do he perform in your internal network, whether it in terms of reconnaissance activities or whether he's trying to find some critical data in your databases, and then it trying to initiate the data exfiltration altogether. So the entire chain of custody of the events from the point where it entered in your environment and from the point till the point where it leaves your organization with the critical data, all such activities will be monitored by IBM QRadar solution and will be notified to the security analyst. So before jumping on to the live demo, I would like to give you a pictorial view of the attack flow for better visualization and understanding. So a attacker sitting in the outside world from my organization sends a phishing mail which get landed on my mail server. And then a particular user to which it is intended downloads that particular mail from the mail server to its end machine. As both the traffic is being monitored by the QRadar network insight solution, it gives me the flexibility to perform the deep packet inspection on the traffic which is being communicated. And once I do the inspection of the traffic, I found that the attachment has an indicator of compromise, which points me to a phishing mail. So I categorize this particular traffic as a phishing mail. So after that particular user opens that particular phishing mail or attachment on his laptop, he initiates a CNC connection. Now, the point to be noted over here is that this CNC connection is not a normal connection based on the IP addresses or the domain name. In this particular scenario, the attacker is trying to use the domain generation algorithm, which is a kind of DNS based attacks, to initiate a CNC connection and to establish a CNC connection uh, by generating random domain names so that it doesn't get prevented by your detection or prevention technology like your perimeter securities, right? So a CNC connection has been established and now some actionables has been downloaded on that particular compromised host, which now tries to do a reconnaissance activity in my environment, which means that it will be doing some port scanning or some services scanning in my internal network to find out to which server they can initiate or open a connection to do a data exfiltration. So after doing the reconnaissance activity, they have found that yes, there is one customer database with the IP address of 10.4.0.25. And on that particular database, they can initiate a connection so that they can do the data exfiltration. In the next step, that particular compromised host tries to download that critical data from my customer DB to its own compromised host machine. And in the last step, it will exfiltrate the data to command and control, again using the DNS protocol to hide the actual packets into the DNS packets, right? So using IBM QRadar DNS Analyzer application, we can detect the DNS-based attacks also, whether it is related to a DGA, which was the first use case, or whether it is related to tunneling, where the actual packet is being hidden in the DNS packets, which is called tunneling, and the spotting use case itself also. So now I'm gonna take you through the live demonstration of the product and how it detects the threat. So once I collect the logs and the flows in the packets, and basis on that, my correlation engine runs. And once the correlation engine runs, it gives me an offense out of it. So if I just open this particular offense, which is the interested offense in terms of potential phishing mail, I can see from the description itself that what all activities has been happened in my environment. So first a phishing mail has been received, then some local scanning has been performed, and then a critical data has been downloaded from one of the server, and then it has been exfiltrated. Now, if I move to the right-hand side of the screen, I can see that there are 12 events and 909 flows, which has contributed to this particular incident. By viewing this, I can say that yes, the solution is doing a real-time correlation between my logs and my flows and my packets, which gives me the flexibility and the ability to derive all the offenses into a single offense basis on the offense chaining itself also. Because if we observe, all these offenses are not being generated by a single rule. There are multiple rules which has been triggered, and automatically basis on the indexing, I have clubbed all these offenses into a single offense so that I can provide a consolidated view to your security analyst. Moving ahead, we can see that yes, there is a source IP, which is a compromised host, which is associated with this offense. And then that this particular source IP or compromised host has now tried to access multiple local IPs of my organization, which is the reconnaissance which he has done. And then there is a public IP associated with this attack, which is the CNC IP. So if I have to view the reputation of this particular IP address, whether it is blacklisted or malicious, I can just issue a command from the console itself, where it will go and find on the threat intelligence platform, which is X-Force in the case of IBM QRadar, and it will give me the reputation of this IP. So I can see that yes, 7.1 is a pretty high risk score, and this particular IP address belongs to a category of command and control server, which establishes that yes, the compromised host is trying to initiate a connection to a CNC, which is a listed CNC connection. So to further investigate this particular incident, I can go down and I can see that what are the source IP or the destination IP or the log sources associated with this particular incident, and to which category all these incidents do lie. So if I just click on all the offenses, all the events which has contributed to this particular incident, I will be able to see the entire chain of custody. So I can see that on 23rd October, 3:54 p.m., my user has received a phishing mail. And after receiving that particular phishing mail and opening that, he has tried to access the CNC server using a domain generation algorithm. And once he downloads or establishes a connection to CNC, it downloads some actionable basis on which it tries to do a local database scanning. Now, going ahead, my interest is to find out that what is the actual mail which has been received by my end user, and what all databases that particular compromised host has scanned in my environment. So for that, I will just go on to the flows and I will open all the flows which has contributed to this particular incident. And from here, I can see that my compromised host has tried to create multiple connection on miscellaneous domains on the CNC IP address whose reputation we have already checked. So I will just exclude this particular IP address from my search to narrow down my investigation plane. And from here, I can see that what is the phishing mail which has been received by my user. So in the end, you can see that this is the source IP and this is the port number, which is my SMTP application which has been used. So if I open this particular incident, I can see that the application is mail.smtp and the time was 3:53 p.m. on 23rd October when this incident has been arised. Now, next very important thing comes is the prioritization of any incident when your security analyst is handling an incident. So for that purpose, we have a magnitude of each and every incident or each and every offense which gets generated, so that your security analyst can have a prioritized view in terms of an attack happening on a business critical server. Definitely, they will be taking care of that particular incident first rather than an incident happening on a UAT server. So for that, the credibility of the log source is being defined, and based on the type of attack happening in your environment, the relevance and severity is automatically detected by the rules which we have configured, and combinedly a magnitude of that particular incident is being detected. Now moving ahead, if I want to see that what is the originating user or who is the sender for this particular mail and who is the receiver for this particular mail, I can see that automated built@example.example.com was the sender, and victim@example.com is the receiver of this phishing mail. With this, I got to know that yes, this is the user in my organization which has now been compromised by a phishing mail. Now going ahead, I want to see that what is the mail subject body. I can see the password check required immediately was the mail subject body, and password check.xls was the attachment, which was a malicious attachment, which has been opened by my user in my organization. So with the help of the QNI solution and the deep packet inspection capabilities, we are able to get the entire detail of the phishing mail which has been received by one of my users, right? So once that particular user clicks on this phishing mail and a CNC connection has been established, a local scanning has been done in my internal network. So from this particular screen and all these alerts, you can see that my compromised host is trying to scan all my internal assets or databases to find that whether he can have access or a service on port number 1521 or 1525, which is specifically related to Oracle database service. So from this, I can clearly say that the intruder or the malicious person who has entered in my environment now has tried to do the access to the Oracle databases in my environment. So from this, now I have the compromised user detail. Now I know that what is the file hash and the file name which has been downloaded by my compromised host. Now moving ahead with my investigation further, I wanted to see that what is the actual random domain which has been generated by this particular compromised host to access the CNC. So if I just go on to this particular event, I can see that this was the random domain which was generated by this compromised host to access the CNC server. So we can see that it is EWRJP. So it is a completely random domain and it cannot be a legitimate, which has been detected by the DNS analyzer application altogether. Now, after all these things has happened, a phishing mail has been received, a CNC has been established, and a scanning in my internal network has already been done. Now, I wanted to see that whether any of the databases in my environment have been breached or not. So if I just click on this particular incident, it will tell me that a SFTP successful login has been initiated. So I can see that this is definitely a compromised host which I am investigating. And now this is the critical server in my organization for which the SFTP successful connection has been initiated. Now I have the target system in my organization itself also, which has been breached with the username again containing victim as a user, which has been a targeted phishing attack user. Now, after that, once that SFTP connection has been initiated, a critical data has been downloaded from that critical server to the compromised host so that it can further initiate data exfiltration to the command and control. And in the last section, it has actually initiated to exfiltrate that particular data. But in this particular scenario, it is using the DNS tunneling algorithm to hide the actual packet data into the DNS packets. So that it can be exfiltrated. So we can see that this compromised host is actually sending large DNS packets to this particular IP address, which is the CNC IP, which we just investigated few minutes back. So with the help of all this information, now your security analyst knows that yes, some phishing mail has been landed in my environment on 192.168.1.5 IP. The username is victim, and the target customer database which has been exploited is 10.20.4.5, right? And at the same time, I also know that what all other databases have been scanned by that particular user in my organization. And then finally, a data exfiltration is being happening in my environment. So with the help of the power of offense chaining, definitely your security analyst will be notified at the time of each and every stage where the phishing mail is received, where the database scanning is being conducted. So at that particular time, your security analyst can ask your network team or your security team to block this particular connection to CNC there and there itself to avoid data exfiltration kind of scenarios, right? So with the help of solution like IBM QRadar, which gives you the power to ingest logs, flows, and packet, you will be able to have a 360-degree view of the security posture of your organization in terms in between all the available methods available to ingest the data and run correlation on top of it. And it will also help your organization security analyst to investigate and detect a threat in a faster manner, which is again one of the key success factor to any security operation center, that how fast you can detect a threat and how fast you can investigate a threat. Right. So with this, I would like to conclude the demonstration of this use case. So thanks a lot. Over to you, Mukbil.
Thank you, Ankit and Sudeep, both of you and all the panelists for your extremely insightful and very brilliant presentations and talks. I would now like to open the house for questions. As we head into the question and answer session, I would request all attendees to keep sending your questions to us. We will try to accommodate as many of them as possible. So the first question that I have in front of me is by Mr. Sri Kumar. He asks whether our radar can be used only in IT systems or it can be used to detect threats in OT systems like SCADA, PLC, Historian, etc. Either of you gentlemen can take up this question. Sudeep, Rishikesh?
Right. So I just responded over chat as well. So yes, a lot of organizations are today using QRadar for monitoring their SCADA networks. And we do have at least 7 different SCADA security tool integrations with which we have these use cases already built up. The second important aspect of the solution is not just understanding, but also the threat intelligence, right? So X-Force threat intelligence actually today provides IOCs related to OT environment as well, which of course you can go ahead and do the research on the X-Force site by yourself because it's open, right? Anybody can go ahead and do the research of the OT related security issues that the world knows. We have already consolidated that, and that comes as a feed into the QRadar system, which helps you understand what is it that you should be wary about, right? So two-pronged approach: one, integration with the SCADA systems, SCADA security systems, and the second is the global threat intelligence, which is OT enabled.
Right. The next question that I have with me is from Mitali Sharma. She asks, how is the risk determined as 7.1? What are the factors and what are the thresholds predefined or algorithms based on industry best practices or threat field? Seems like a comprehensive question.
Yeah, I will take that question as well, because this is again automated, right? So what we do is one, the global threat fit, right? So the industry, the CVSS score, the CVID already gives me a particular prioritization. The second thing is that the tool that is telling me is already telling me a priority. This is high critical event. This is low critical event. There is informational event, right? So there are already a categorization that the logs provide me, a categorization that the global threat intelligence provides me. And when I'm normalizing the data, that is also a time where I can attach a criticality to that system. The other portion is where I attach the criticality based upon the asset or the user, right? That is from the organization perspective. The CMDB tells me that this is my internal asset and this is critical databases are running on it. Here is the user. He is a trading person, so his criticality. So there are various threat data points. Each of these data points has got a value. Few of those values, we pick it up from the global best practice. Few of the things you can write down as you are doing the normalization. The creation of the magnitude is an algorithm that we provide automatically, but the actual risk values that is there is a calculated field. If that gives an answer, because it's a risk calculation, a quantitative risk calculation is a world in itself, right? So certain amount of automation is already provided in the platform. You can always go ahead and add the risk values with your own things. Another one, which is very critical risk value that we use is in the behavior analytics, right? We give a risk value to every activity that you are doing so that you can come up with a risk score for individuals, right? Have the risk score, the riskier you are. So that is again another place where the algorithms that we have defined, which gives me that risk score for that particular user at any given point of time.
Right. So I think we have time for just one more question left now. We have already overshot our time limit, but nevertheless, we will take this up. This question is from Jebin. He would want to hear and learn about asset grouping based on asset owner and visibility for group members in the mitigation process. Am I audible and visible?
Do you want to take that as well?
Yes, Rishikesh.
No, I'm requesting Sudeep to take that.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was actually answering another question. I didn't follow this question. I'm so sorry about this.
No worries. I can repeat it. So so Jebin wants to know and learn about asset grouping based on asset owner and visibility for group members in the mitigation process.
Yeah, I saw that. I also actually responded to that.
Okay.
As well. So again, the CMDB, right? The CMDB data that the organization has would help me do those. Again, the categorization or the grouping is something that you can drive. We have a specific section in which not just the assets, we are also grouping the topography, right? The network topography that you have, the branches that you have. So all of those various kind of groupings can be done based upon automatic data input from a CSV file or a configuration file. Or you could dynamically do it as you see the systems come up and say, okay, these things within QRadar, you do the grouping rather than grouping done at a different level. So both the ways you are able to do grouping of people and write the rules for that particular group or you can write for all the groups. So those flexibilities are there.
Wonderful. So, friends, I must say it has been a wonderfully insightful and a very practical discussion. But in the interest of time, we will really have to wrap it up as we have already overshot by 3 minutes. I can see on my monitor. We still have lots of questions from the audience, and I really feel and we would all appreciate that this shows the level of interest and excitement that is there and which is very palpable in the senior IT professionals who comprise this virtual gathering. But in the interest of time, as I already said, we'll have to wrap it up. I request all of you to get in touch with the representatives here. Should you have further questions and queries, you could also get in touch with us. And thank you all for joining us today, the attendees, the panelists. And I must thank our partners, IBM and NetMagic, without whose support this webinar would not have been possible. There is one more request that I would like to make at this point of time. Kindly and please fill up the feedback form on your way out. It will actually help us a lot, help us immensely in understanding your own thoughts and in improving this platform. It's been a lovely, lovely discussion. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day ahead.
Mumpil, before we close, I just wanted to make one
Yes.
note,
Please
right?
go
So
on.
if we were not able to answer many of the questions, do reach out to us on marketing@netmagicsolutions.com. That is marketing@netmagicsolutions.com. We will have an account representative get in touch with you and also connect you with the technical team to specifically answer your queries. And if you are interested in doing a POC of this solution, then do let us know. We will evaluate it, and we will be more than happy to support on the POC as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think it's been a wonderfully productive and very interactive session today. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sudeep. Thanks, Rishikesh.
Thanks,
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Sangeet. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.